housing panel. I'm just going to go through the attendees that we have here this morning and some of the apologies. So we've got myself, Councillor Majid Khan, I'm chairing the meeting. We've got Councillor Dave Nevitt, who's Vice Chair. We've got Councillor Beach, Councillor Cox, Councillor Anderson, and from DMBC, we have Dan Swain, we have Scott Cardwell, Chris Dungworth, we've got Christine Rothwell, and we also have Dan Fell with us this morning from the Chamber of Commerce. I've had apologies from Councillors Hughes and Councillor Mounsey. Councillor Mounsey has been in hospital and he's been unwell, so I'm sure all the panel wishes Councillor Mounsey a swift recovery. Just going to go through a couple of housekeeping rules, if you wouldn't mind. First of all, if you've got put your mobile phones to silent in case you're speaking and it just starts to ring in the background. When you're not talking, please put your microphones on mute to stop any background noise, and try to avoid the chat function because those messages don't always get looked at or picked up. If you do have a point to make, please use the raise your hand function. And if you have had your hand up for a while and you've not grabbed my attention, then please feel free to give me a little verbal nudge and I'll pick it up. The meeting this morning is going to be recorded and it'll be available on the Doncaster Council website and on our YouTube channel. So just bear that in mind, and that your voice and image may be retained and used by us for future publications. And if you do get dropped off at any point, because I know it can happen, please try to get admitted back into the meeting and one of the officers will allow you in as quickly as possible. Now, other than Councillors Hughes and Mounsey, do we have any other apologies that you're aware of, Christine or anybody else?
No, Chair, I don't have any other apologies, thank you.
We don't have any members of the press here this morning, but I don't think there's any reason why they should be excluded.
No,
Are there any declarations of interest from any member?
No, Chair.
Thank you. And can we go to the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 12th of October 2020, and can they be approved as a correct and accurate recording, please?
Proposed, Chair.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. And we have an agenda item where members of the public can make a statement, but we don't have any members of public here this morning, unless someone's crept in the last minute or so, which I don't think they have. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is an update on the business of the chamber and any future issues or concerns which we may have which are going to be affecting business. I'll bring in Chris Dungworth first, if I may.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. We're asked to put this report together to firstly update on the current situation with business support. We presented Business Doncaster to you guys last year. So this time Majid asked us to update on the current situation with business support across Doncaster and then introduce the Chamber so the Chamber could talk through the work they do to support the business community and how we're working together closely on future business support activity. We put together quite a lengthy report which hopefully you have read with all the information concerned in it. The beginning of that report differentiates the work of Business Doncaster and Doncaster Chamber of Commerce. We are two separate organisations. Historically, Business Doncaster concentrates on property and inward investment, whereas the Chamber of Membership organisation that support their members and look at business support, but also get involved in other external funding programmes to deliver on behalf of the Chamber and other parties. In the last 12 months, we have seen the difficult situation with regards to the economy. Firstly, we've worked together through the flooding, through Brexit, and since March 2020 on the coronavirus pandemic. This has meant, certainly for Business Doncaster, changing our operation model. we've moved back into concentrating on business support rather than just inward investment and property activity and sector growth activity. So we started with flooding recovery at the end of 2020, and then we moved on to COVID support in 2021, and that work has involved supporting businesses, helping business rates team to process and deliver government and city region grants. And we also picked up a delivery of a small discretionary grant for home and mobile businesses, which has worked over the last 3 months, and we've worked hard to deliver that and get as much money out to businesses as possible. And we continue to do that, and with the government and the Chancellor making more announcements as we move forward, we will continue to do that over the next 6 to 12 months. We've also started delivering some business support programs. We are delivering a productivity program with our colleagues across the rest of the city region, Barnsley, Sheffield and Rotherham councils, and that's giving grants to businesses who are looking at increasing their productivity. We're working hard on Launchpad, a business startup program which has been delivered on our behalf by the Chamber of Commerce, and that's starting to see an increase in numbers of people coming to us for support as people are made redundant and looking at possible options for their future career. They are looking at self-employment and starting businesses. So that is we're getting more and more referrals through that process. And we are starting to pick up more and more businesses looking to us for support. We are working closely with the Chamber and Sheffield City Region on this, and Sheffield City Region have got some more money from the government for business support activities. And this month they've just appointed 4 business advisors who will sit in Doncaster and work with us and take referrals from the Chamber to support businesses as we move forward, as and when the pandemic improves, furlough ends, and businesses start to trade together. Before I hand over to Dan and the Chamber, so Dan can talk through the Chamber activity, I must say that the last 12 months, the Chamber and Business Doncaster have never worked as close together as we are doing now. In the past, it's not been an element of competition, but we have been 2 separate organisations working independently. We are now working closer than ever. The Business Doncaster team have supported the Chamber, who put a lot of webinars at the start of the pandemic on for businesses, which were very successful, and we supported the Chamber in that. And we had people on those webinars to help business support. Through the last 12 months, the Chamber supported us on getting grants out to businesses and promoting the grant regime. We have supported the Chamber on Brexit and worked together on making businesses aware of what's happening with Brexit and how they can get government and Chamber support. And we're now working very, very closely together on a town centre economic recovery plan, which both organisations sit and work together to help businesses in the town centre and beyond recover. And hopefully coming out of that, there will be additional business support offer out there for businesses run by both the Chamber and Business Doncaster, and the Chamber will pick up quite a lot of new membership hopefully from town centre businesses. So that's where we are in terms of the business support. I will now hand over to Dan to talk through Doncaster Chamber of Commerce and their role in supporting Doncaster and the business community.
Thank you, Chris. Dan, do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, very, very happy to, Chair. And firstly, thank you for the invitation to talk to the committee. It's good to see everybody. Chair, is it helpful if I sort of, rather than do a deep dive into any particular thing at this point, just sort of build on Chris's presentation to remind colleagues of the sort of the buckets of activity that the Chamber's involved with, and then sort of pause there, and then that will sort of help people direct questions accordingly as we get into a discussion, rather than me just talking forever. Is that a sensible approach that works for you?
Sure. Yep. That's fine.
Well, okay. Well, just as a sort of a reminder for colleagues about sort of what the Chamber is and sort of our structure and accountabilities, because that might be useful. The Chamber has served Doncaster for around 80 years. We are a not-for-profit organisation limited by guarantee. At the core of that is the fact that we are a membership organisation, you know, funded for and by Doncaster's business community, but we are open to work for and with any business in the borough, not just our members. So in terms of headline numbers, we support something like 2,500 firms a year in some way, shape or form. At the core of that are 700 Chamber members who collectively employ something like 55% of Doncaster's private sector workforce. So we are pretty representative of the economy, but I've got our hands up. We don't work with everybody, and we are particularly light, as my board like to remind me and challenge me on, in some of the B2C areas, where sort of B2B, our manufacturers, construction, engineers, organisations, we are very representative of. In terms of who holds me to account, it is back to our business community. Our board of directors is elected for our membership base. That's a good diagonal sweep of micro to large businesses, cross sectors. And I hope, as colleagues know, we try and put partnership at the heart of everything we do. So we do have co-opted representation on our board from the local authority, the college, and the NHS Trust as well, to make sure we're as plugged into as many things as possible and adding value where we can do. In terms of what we do, 5 principal areas of activity. The first is the stuff that we do with partners on creating a better business environment in Doncaster, what we would label as our policy work. So things like the campaign for the University Technical College, which opened last September, was something we played a leadership role in. We try and be sort of collegiate in all that we do to make sure that the business sentiment and the business voice that we hear, in the here and now on things like COVID support, in the macro stuff, things like skills supply, we're plugging that into partners and rolling our sleeves up to do something about it to make Doncaster a better place to do business. And as Chris said earlier, and I can only kind of amplify this, Chair, some of that kind of partnership working has been absolutely stellar this last 12 months, and hats off to people who are sort of, for all our teams where it feels like first and foremost working for Doncaster first, our constituent organisation second, long may that continue. In terms of the other 4 bits of our jigsaw, we do offer a plethora of services through chamber membership. There's around 50, 60 different services in that proposition, things like legal, HR support, networking, ways to save money, things to help businesses become greener. Anything that can help business get to A to B is in there. And that's our sort of bread and butter of our core business support proposition. We also have a level of expertise in international trade and export, so things like documentation, customs declarations, which is a big issue, and that's at the heart of those big queues in Kent and all the things we've seen in the press and that kind of stuff, helping business navigate that sort of small but important paperwork exercise of internationalisation. Plus a raft of training, events, language services, etc., that helps businesses thrive overseas. So clearly, in addition to the COVID support, we have been exceptionally busy helping businesses prep and then navigate through the immediate Brexit period, and happy to share some insights on that too if it's helpful. Fourthly, we deliver for our public sector partners a basket of contracted business support services, particular expertise. Chris mentioned Launchpad in early stage and startup businesses. We also have a project called Scale Up 360, which is about supporting high growth firms in partnership with Sheffield Hallam University. Local authority deliver a community wealth builder project aimed at social enterprise, and we have a new sort of working with the NBC colleagues project in the pipelines, building on the advanced program to support productivity issues. And then the 5th piece that we do is the sort of a whole raft of work which has the sort of the title of Opportunities Doncaster, which hopefully colleagues are reasonably familiar with, to bring the worlds of business and education together and to help young people understand the fantastic careers opportunities available to them in the area, support work readiness, but actually get businesses to be young people ready as well as young people to be work ready. So we've been doing lots of activity to stimulate demand around apprenticeships, around 200 opportunities generated for people on the government's Kickstart scheme to find pathways into employment and so forth. So in addition to sort of helping businesses navigate through COVID and also Brexit, we've also, we hope, played a key role this last 12 months, supporting young people so they don't get left behind in this crisis, and sort of the upstream work to help businesses recognise young people as part of the solution to the pandemic and the economic recovery, rather than something that gets a bit neglected or sort of falls from businesses kind of mind. So they're the 5 sort of worlds that we sort of operate in, Majid, and and very happy as we get in conversations to elaborate on any of those and talk specifically about what that activities look like during the COVID era and what we're experiencing in the private sector.
Thank you, Dan. I mean, it goes without saying, without a doubt, that the residents of Doncaster and the wider region, just as the businesses, have gone through a terribly difficult time. First of all, with Brexit, and then the COVID restrictions and lockdowns, and the role that you guys have played has been invaluable to ensuring that Doncaster succeeds, is thriving, and our businesses have the support and they can build the resilience they have to continue to help Doncaster prosper. So you're doing a fantastic job in giving that support. Chris, you mentioned something around that, how you've kind of transitioned back into business support. Can you just talk through over the last 2 years what that's looked like for the benefit of some of our panel members, please?
Yes, no problem, Chair. A couple of years ago, I think myself, Dan, Scott Cardwell, had discussions around the business support offer. And we were offering quite a lot of free business support, which was precluding the chamber from picking up on membership because businesses were coming to us. So we made the decision to move away from business support and concentrate on our core activity, which is attracting new inward investment and supporting the larger companies, the bigger employers. And that was starting to work through our plans for that. And then certainly the flooding and COVID hit us. And the chamber were going through restructure at the time, which meant they didn't have the capacity what they'd had previously. So we were forced into picking up quite a lot of business support because businesses were phoning us, businesses phoning the chamber, and we worked collectively on that business support. So our model over the last 12 months has changed really to a mixture of attracting new inward investment, and we're still very, very successful in doing that. And we've got some announcements shortly coming to fruition around companies we work with on new inward investment. But we've worked more into the business support agenda, working together with the chamber. So we've jointly delivered webinars to support businesses. We've jointly delivered messaging to businesses around what support we can offer. Our team's gone out and moved from sector growth into supporting businesses, interacting with businesses on a one-to-one basis to help them generate support. We've done a lot of work on grant work, working with our business rates team to get the government grants out and making sure businesses can get all of the correct amount of money in the correct place. We've delivered our own grant scheme, and we're shortly going to start delivering an economic recovery grant on behalf of the council, which will attract funding for about 345 businesses. So that's a big piece of work we're working on. We're also part of the Sheffield City region, and they've done a recovery action plan. So we sat along with the chamber on a number of groups who are looking at the recovery action plan and putting a recovery plan in place for the city region and drawing the money down from government. That has resulted in 4 advisors will come and sit here with us over the next 2 years to support businesses, which the chamber can feed into and make referrals from. We're also getting a supply chain officer that's coming to Business Doncaster to sit with us to deliver supply chain activities and find new contracts for businesses. And we've also, through the city region, got a new framework of specialist support. So if we talk to a business and they want specialist support around supply chain, around marketing, then we can signpost them to the specialist support and the city region will fund that. So collectively, both ourselves, the chamber and the city region have worked together over the past 12 months to really put a better, more comprehensive business support offer out there for businesses. At this stage, we don't know what the response is going to be. Quite a lot of businesses still got people on furlough, so it's not affecting their cash flow. But as furlough ends and businesses start to operate again, we want to mitigate redundancies and really work to support businesses to get back operational and get them growing again. And there's a number of productivity programs being put in place to do that, which the chairman and ourselves are delivering. Do you want to add to that, Dan?
I think the sort of comment I'd sort of make is probably useful for sort of councillor colleagues is there's a really good organic process that takes place in terms of that sort of divvy up of labour between sort of Business Doncaster and the chamber. You know, I think there's sort of honesty, you know, on a things like daily, weekly basis around sort of where capacity is and about sort of where growth aspirations might be on our part and things like that. So it's sort of really good in terms of sort of carving that up. You know, the principle that we would always want people to be aware of is that sort of the chamber doesn't just exist. That's really important. You know, we have to sort of pay for ourselves in a multitude of ways, and therefore we are always looking for the opportunity to do more to serve our economy and grow the membership base. So I think it's really good practice that when there's sort of a bend or a tilt in terms of publicly funded business support provision, whether that's in Doncaster or it's the Sheffield City region, I have to say Doncaster's far better at having these conversations with us than sort of SCR is. It's just that useful sense check to say, chamber, is this something you were planning at looking at commercially? Does bringing this provision in sort of on a funded basis displace your activity? But we're getting good at having that sort of check and balance in, and I think that's just a really healthy thing, and long may it continue, Chris and colleagues.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chris. I mean, one of the things that I'm keen to learn about is the number of firms that we've offered support to in Doncaster and what the criteria has been for that support. And also I think it was Donald Rumsfeld who said we have the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns and the unknown knowns. And in a similar way, do you know of many businesses that are not asking for support, and have these businesses been approached to give support to?
To answer that, Chair, we do run a key account management program, which we interact with probably the 70-80 biggest companies in Doncaster on a regular basis. So we know what their plans are, we know what they're up to, we know where their growth potential is, we know where they're struggling, and we report that through the city into the city region and beyond on a regular basis. We supported something like 800-900 companies through the past 12 months, quite a lot, mainly around grant applications and funding applications. The Chamber have probably supported a little bit more than that through their membership, etc.
So Chris, would that have been then, so the 800 or 900 that you've offered support to, would that have been a separate cohort of companies to what Dan and the Chamber have offered support to, or will there be some crossover in those numbers?
There will be some crossover in those numbers. The Chamber put a different offer for most. I mean, we do quite a lot of work around HR support activity and productivity through our grant processes. It is fair to say that quite a lot of this has been reactive, Chair. We've not had the capacity or resource to go and proactive target businesses, but when we started delivering the productivity program, we put calls out to businesses to come forward, and we were swamped straight away with businesses coming forward on that one. So we had 40 grants, and they went out the door straight away. So we do work proactively. We do put marketing messages out there to say, come and talk to us, come and talk to the Chamber if you need support, and we're starting to see an increase in numbers now coming forward.
Chris, Dan, is there anything that you'd add to that, please?
Yeah, we're going to have to swap around who goes first for the next one, aren't we? Just so we're not kind of just saying whichever said every time. But I mean, we sort of in the initial phase, we sort of, as Chris talked, put on a pretty comprehensive webinar program right at the start of sort of the first lockdown. To the point we're sort of running 3 online events a day, and we sort of served around sort of 2,000 delegates across those in that initial period. And as Chris says, there'll be some overlap with those business.com. I sort of feel reasonably content as a board that our outreach has been good on this in terms of promoting either what our core agencies, the Chamber, the business Doncaster et al. Can offer and what's in our toolkit. A pretty good job of sort of signposting businesses to what's been available from sort of national government. Where we haven't been able to succeed is where there have been just gaps in the provision of the support that's available. You know, we've not had the local resource to fill a national gap, or for whatever reason, national government hasn't sort of plugged it. You know, so the one that kind of gets lots and lots of airtime, of course, you know, is around that support for kind of self-employed people sort of under 2 years worth of training. You know, it's just been a gap that in many cases has been unfillable, sadly. You know, so we've got stuff to the parts where we can do, or when there's a bit of the toolkit that can solve the problem. There have been others that we've sadly known about but been unable to support. There will, of course, imagine the unknown unknowns. There'll be people that aren't on our kind of collective radars and for whatever reason haven't been able to find us either, and therefore may have had to suffer in silence, which is clearly very, very regrettable on this. I think the other point I would make is that sort of it's not just been a case of getting support to business. There is no support measure under the sun from government or from local agencies that's as good for business as a free and open and functioning economy on this one. So there's lots of companies that have had cash or resource, and that's helped them meet costs. But what it hasn't done for many of them is compensate for huge amounts of lost revenue, and that's the bit where we want to be absolutely anxious to sort of, as the shackles come off, we're sort of primed to get Doncaster out of the traps as quickly as possible so that we can get back to that open functioning economy bit and start to put the income back into businesses, as well as helping us to mitigate costs and so forth for and what have you.
It raises another question, Dan, around you saying that there's been gaps which have been left by national government where they've failed to provide adequate support for people who are often self-employed. So I'm aware of one program, and Chris and others will correct me if I'm wrong, but we started and initiated a support scheme for taxi drivers, I think, where we were providing I think funding or loans or a grant of up to £1,000 per taxi driver and other self-employed people. So was that something which came as an initiative locally from us, and was it in conjunction with the chamber, or was it something which was a steer from cabinet or the mayor or some officers, or what brought that around then, Chris? Would you be able to answer that?
The taxi driver scheme came through the Sheffield City region grant support activity, which a steering group was formed, which I sat on, and Alan Stores from Business Rates sat on. And the taxi driver scheme was a city region scheme, which was endorsed by the Business Growth Board, which is chaired by Mayor Oz. So that was endorsed, and the same for the driving instructors. They got the same deal. All the government additional resource grants have gone out via the government in the Sheffield City region. Doncaster Council, through our business rates team, have distributed those grants. All those grants have been in terms of supporting businesses with property costs. They've not been supporting loss of income. So through government grants, they've not supported loss of income. It's just been property and business costs, i.e. rent, rates, etc. We picked up through Doncaster Council a local discretionary scheme, which we gave £1,000 to the home workers, mobile workers and the self-employed who weren't picked up by the city region or the government grant schemes. That was a Doncaster Council scheme which we delivered. The only difference with that scheme, we could not fund anybody who got self-employed income support. So that was the mechanism for home workers and mobile workers to get money from the government. Quite a lot of businesses applied for that, but quite a lot applied for us who had already got income support, and we had to turn them down because we wasn't remitted to deliver that. But we have supported 400 businesses, self-employed, home and mobile workers, and given them £1,000 each. And these businesses have not picked up any other form of funding during this pandemic through the government. Home workers have not got business costs, so they couldn't pick up the government AIG schemes. So we funded that through a discretionary scheme. And we're still open. We've still got a pot of money, and we're going to keep it open as long as possible, as long as it's needed.
Chris, would it be unfair of me then to surmise and say that the support which has been provided by central government has been much more favourable to landlords and people who collect commercial rents compared to what businesses themselves do and what they need for actual running costs? Am I fair in that presumption?
The government grants have covered business-related costs, so that's rental income, that's business leases, etc. It's not funded loss of income.
So it's been more for landlords. In a roundabout way, I mean, in layman's terms, it's been much more beneficial for landlords than it has for business owners and workers, we'd say.
No, the money has gone to business owners. It's not gone to landlords. It has gone to business owners, but it's to pick up their property costs.
Okay.
Now, there's still quite a lot of businesses that fell through the gaps. For instance, the manufacturing sector has not been covered at all. Some of the other sectors have covered. We've had to push for the training sector to be included, and the majority of grants have gone business to consumer. Businesses to business have really suffered through this because they've not received the level of support that other business to consumer businesses have received. They got the initial grant back in March, the original £10,000, £25,000. That's the only grant that some businesses have received throughout this whole pandemic.
I mean, Doncaster's has a big manufacturing industry and businesses, and so what you're saying is you feel that from national government the support that should have been provided to manufacturing hasn't been there, or it could have been upped. Is that fair to say?
It's worth to say, there's balance on this. There are businesses that have been delighted by the national government support, where it has been a real lifeline and just kept some organisations going. And I think the early interventions, the big and generous things around, particularly like sort of furlough in the first instance, were really good, really well received. I think what's frustrated colleagues in my network has been that early days, unprecedented stuff, big, generic, generous things, probably the only game in town, and really, really impactful. As time has evolved over the last the next 12 months, clearly more and more kind of subsectors or gaps where people have slipped through the cracks have become apparent. And I think the frustration has been that as we're now quite far into this, that those kind of second wave interventions to support some of those people that have fallen through the cracks haven't been quite as thought through already as available as we might like, and talk about the self-employed, but there's other sectors, take arts, CAST, the organisation I'm chair of, it's a national performance organisation, able to access big pots of cash. Loads of the freelancers in the arts community, small micro businesses, feel like they're quite far away from all kinds of support interventions, and they're the ones taking extra jobs, driving for, DPD or whatever else it is, just to kind of bring some income kind of in. So there's, for me, the big generic stuff at the start, really impactful, really helpful, saved a lot of businesses. Over time, it's when the gaps have come that we would have liked to see plugged a bit more. I think for our manufacturing community, Majid, it's important to say we've got, I talk to as many businesses at the moment who things are going really well for, as well as really badly. That is important to say. It's part of my job to say everything's dire and we need all kinds of government to give more support, because I would say that, wouldn't I? But it is worth saying, we've got some great success stories in the current climate as well. For many of those manufacturers, it is Brexit that has caused far more consternation than it is COVID in the current climate. So what we're seeing is lots of bottlenecks at the current time of people just not being able to get goods out to EU markets based on either the complexity they're having to wrestle with at the 11th hour, or actually real shortfalls in terms of logistics and freight forwarding capacity at the moment, just to service particularly small SME manufacturers. So that for me feels like probably a bigger barrier for that sector at the moment than COVID does in many ways.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to open up some questioning for other members of the panel now, and I can see that Councillor Cox and Councillor Hogarth. I'll go with Councillor Cox first, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a bit that I think what you're trying to get across there, Mad, is that to Dan and Chris is, I think you're trying to push them to say that there hasn't been enough support from government, which, and I just think you're trying to play a bit of a game, but that's up to you. Thank you.
Far from it, Chris. I mean, I always, in my panel meetings, as you know, I'm always politically neutral. And if anyone was to say that the national government has massively failed us, I'd be the first one to prevent them from doing so. And I'd be the first one to say that the Tories have completely let us down. It's not something that I would say, or I would encourage any other panel members to say. What I'm trying to say is that there's gaps in the market, such as manufacturing, where, so under furlough, as Dan and Chris have pointed out, is which have been missed. What I'm trying to get to the bottom of is, are those sectors vibrant in Doncaster? Are they going to be adversely affected by not getting the relevant support? And it could lead to a downturn in economics or economic downturn or productivity in Doncaster because manufacturing may not get the support it does. And as a part of this panel, it's good to get to the bottom and the nitty-gritty of that, so we can then ask either the relevant director or chair of OMC, or even me as chair of this committee, to write to either the relevant partners, either at Sheffield City Region or even in government, urging them to give support to areas which may not have been highlighted. So in relation to manufacturing, I didn't know that it was an issue up until now. I really didn't. My understanding was that the grant support scheme which had been provided covered all of that, and it was just more self-employed people who were suffering adversely. So it's news to me. So I'm just trying to get down to the nitty-gritty. And Councillor Cox, I'm sure you know, I don't, especially when I'm chairing panels, I don't get into political arguments or political games. I criticise where criticism is due, and I give praise where praise is due as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll bring in now Councillor Hogarth, if I may.
Yeah, it's just regarding Brexit. I think it's, well, I'm basically asking, what impact has it had on Doncaster firms, both positive and negative? You know, some will benefit, some, but overall Doncaster-wise, how has it impacted on firms?
Do you want to say that, Dan?
I can come in on some of that. So again, I think it's really important to be sort of balanced on this. You know, our business community was as divided as other communities on Brexit. You know, I've got some ardent Europeans in my membership base who talk to me often and vocally. I've got some equally ardent sort of leavers in my community of interest who believe that, you know, in the years to come, you know, we have significant opportunities on the back of potential trade agreements around the world. So, you know, I clearly represent a mixed community on this one. I think what has united, if you like, and again, I'm talking very simplistically here for the ease of this, you know, the Brexiteers and the Remainers. Clearly, there's a huge kind of grey mass in the middle of this. You know, but what has united them is whether they believe that Brexit creates a huge opportunity for them to be maximised, or it creates a significant level of risk to be mitigated. Preparedness was the thing that both camps would always want in this. Good notice, timely stuff that lets, you know, business likes things to be boring. That lets them sort of plan accordingly for this stuff. And I think the 11th hour nature of the deals that were reached back in December meant we always had like a ridiculously short time for business to do that preparatory stuff. You know, our business leaders are innovative, they're entrepreneurial, and business solves problems. But to solve problems, we sort of need to know what the parameters are around legislation and law and rules and boring stuff like that. And so without knowing what those rules are going to be with more than sort of a week's notice, it was hard to do the prep stuff. So what we are seeing is quite operational challenges, but they are getting in the way. Some of that is dealing with the complexity of customs declarations. Again, without going into detail, to get goods in and out of the EU used to be something like a one piece of paper work. That piece of paper is now turned into something like a 50-page document. That's difficult. We have expertise in some places. Freight forwarders are good at that stuff. The Chamber has spent the last 2-3 years prepping for this, trying mainly commercially to create capacity for that, and we've geared our staff up for it. But there's just not enough people nationally to do customs declarations for the volume of stuff that there is to be done. It's a national issue. Trying to put Doncaster solutions in place for it, it's going to take time to catch up. One of the other problems is in the freight. Sorry, to put one last point, and then I'll pause. One of the other specific challenges is in terms of logistics and hauliers, they are now really picking and choosing which work they want to accept for exporters to get things into the EU. So, for example, we've got sort of micro and SME businesses, typically small volume, you know, not huge dividends returned for the logistics companies. That work's getting turned down because there's just too much faff involved with it. Now, hence, we've got lots of SME manufacturers who are getting really a bit stuck, and despite sensible prep and planning and a bit of stockpiling type stuff, it's getting a bit squeaky for them at the moment.
Dan, can I just ask, sorry, Charlie, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Can I just ask how, if you can put a number on even percentages or volumes, how many businesses have been directly affected by the issues that you raised there then in Doncaster?
Hard to give an exact number, Magic, just because of the sort of the supply chain stuff that exists behind it. But at a headline level, we don't work with all that many exporters. Doncaster has a dearth of companies that trade internationally. That's a problem for our economy and something that me and Chris and Scott have been trying to work on for a number of years to get more overseas opportunities. So we regularly work with about 150 international traders, and I would say almost 100% of those are butting up against some problem or other, but the severity of that problem will be very different for some. Some will be low level operational stuff. For some who've got a lion's share of the market in the EU and they're coming up against some of those issues I talked about, these are almost business critical factors for them.
Has it, some of the challenges they faced, have they eased off as we've progressed into the year, or are those challenges still as much there?
I think it's still too easy to say with any credibility, to be honest. There are easements in place on both sides to sort of smooth the edges of the transition period. So it's hard to sort of quantify when they disappear how much some of these challenges will hockey stick up, or how much that will have smoothed the way people are just accustomed to doing this kind of thing. I'd say as a business support agency, we are getting better and quicker at dealing with some of these challenges, because it's like anything, the first time you encounter it takes a while to figure out. By the second time you do it, you're a little bit better. By the 10th or 12th time you do it, you're quick, and it's sort of old hat. So this very specific and detailed thing around customs declarations, we're starting to get people through that system quicker, but capacity is still an issue for us. And I think the nature of our, say, Chris might have a sort of take on this. We've got some very big and sophisticated exporters, of course, locally, the likes of us, our brand stuff, but our rank and file SMEs, often the planning happens the first time they come up against an issue on this. It's not planning at all, it's kind of retrofit sort of thing to it. Yeah. So until people have got for a period of time coming up against the first issue, it's sort of hard to say we're over the hump of this. So my best guess would be there's probably at least another 6 to 9 months of normalisation yet with this to sort of get through.
Thank you. Sorry,
Chair, can I just add a point to Councillor Hogarth, please, Chair? Working with for our business Doncaster, working with Department of International Trade, we have seen a small spike in the number of businesses who are looking to relocate into the UK and open operations in the UK from the EU. And we worked on a number of inquiries on that basis. They're estimating a 25% increase in inward investment related inquiries from the EU in the next year or so. So hopefully we're in a position to take advantage of some of them. We've already landed a Dutch company and Dutch rail company who's opened a facility at the airport on the back of Brexit transition. So there is opportunities there for Doncaster going forward from companies looking to open and operate in the UK.
That's good to hear, Chris. Yeah. Councillor Hogarth, I'll bring you back in.
Yeah, but on with that, how much effort's been put into encourage people to buy British and buy local? And by local, I don't mean a firm that sets up in Doncaster, then imports everything from China to be classed as a local firm. It's more manufactured locally, manufactured in Great Britain. What is the Chamber and the Council doing to encourage that, as opposed to because a business is based in Doncaster but doesn't manufacture in Doncaster or locally?
We work across the patch, and we have a dedicated office now, and we are going to bring another one in for the City Region from the City Region Fund. And we're going to look at contract opportunities for local companies and working with each other. We do have a key performance indicator in the team around localisation and getting companies to work together. And we're currently on an £18 million achievement this year from getting local companies to work with each other. So that's key to our operation. We want companies to trade local, trade in Doncaster wherever possible. And certainly not to open in Doncaster and bring things in for overseas. We've just got a new inward investor come in, which will shortly be announced. They've agreed with us, and part of our incentive schemes, they must work on a localisation agenda. They have given us a toolkit of of items they want sourcing, and they've agreed to work with us on bringing as much as we can in from Doncaster. So that's part of our memorandums and operation. We are looking at a series of meet the buyers with the Chamber this year through the supply chain programme to make sure we keep business in Doncaster and work together locally.
Thank you.
Councillor Nevitt. You're on mute, Councillor Nevitt. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Thank you, Chair. We'll start again. Yeah, I just wondered how are people being affected financially, and how many people have been made redundant in Doncaster over this period, and how does the COVID lockdown affect our residents' personal finances, and therefore the business with the furlough and jobs?
We've got a number of business resident support programs, Councillor Nevitt, to help businesses back into employment and back into training opportunities, which we're rolling out at the moment, called Advance. It's probably a different conversation to bring them to the table to talk to you about their work, but we are doing a lot with residents to find them new opportunities, new training facilities, and putting some money into upskilling these residents. Unemployment has gone up. It's to be honest, it's not as big as we envisaged at this point in time. We've not seen any major closures. The only one we've seen is Eton, and we work collectively with the Chamber and Job Centre Plus to find opportunities for residents who are working at Eton to find other opportunities. And we found 80% of their workforce new positions or new training opportunities. So we've not seen the big volume of redundancies we expected. Sheffield and Rotherham have seen quite a lot, more than we have, but we do think the furlough scheme, as it operating, is sustaining employment at the moment. We wait to see what happens when furlough finishes. I mean, the Chancellor's announcing an extension till September today, so hopefully that'll encourage businesses to look at their future successive plannings as they move forward.
Chair, you're muted.
Thank you, Councillor Nevitt. Dan, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in on this point?
Yeah, we're just one of the things I really would like just to stress, and I think it's important, is that we know there's some outliers to this. We know there's been some bad behaviour, particularly sort of, big, national profile business throughout some of the COVID stuff. So 99% of the business community that I work with, and I know Chris will work too, and their approach and their ethos and support workers, to support people, to support communities, I just feel has been sort of absolutely exemplary. In some cases, this has manifested itself in that kind of huge effort for the PPE supply. We've seen incredible acts of philanthropy from the private sector to support, charities, NHS, health organisations, and then just the sort of sacrifices that I know so many businesses have made to sort of taking personal hits to sort of support their staff people. When I've had those really dark day conversations with people, head in their hands, lost a life's kind of work all undone, the sorrow has ordinarily been about their people rather than themselves in the organisation. And I just think it's a bit of a sales pitch on behalf of the private sector and the community I sort of represent to the Magic. I think it's just remembering that, because as Doncaster reopens and recovers, we sort of have to remember this has been a huge partnership effort, and our business committee has been part of that partnership, and we want to make sure that, just as it is currently, that Doncaster does stay steadfastly sort of business friendly. And I think occasionally a few sort of headlines about bad behaviour and the outliers to that can sort of speak for all of us. So I think the regard business has for people, clearly there will be business failures, clearly there will be job losses. That's just a reality of where we are. I think the particulars we've been keen to sort of focus on, again, back to the divvy up of labour between the organisations. Lots of support now available for sort of startup and entrepreneurs. People want to find their way back into sort of gainful employment through that kind of self-employment route. There is good support in situ now for that. And then particularly sort of really focused and concerned about sort of young people who might be entering the labour market for the first time in this climate, and again, I mean, that's where sort of initiatives like sort of Kickstart, and whilst there's a few sort of teething problems with that, I can get into detail on that later, maybe, you know, the good interventions by government that will help businesses use young people as part of the solution. So, you know, if we can amplify any of that kind of stuff as well, I think that'd be a good intervention.
Chair, can I come back on that, please?
Of course, Councillor Nevitt.
I asked about how many people had been redundant. You brought up about Eton closing down, and that 80% of those had found new jobs. So, would it be possible to give us a ballpark figure of how many people in Doncaster had been made redundant, and how many had got those jobs back? And as a further point as well, are there any resources available to help residents organise their own finances and how they can transition into employment and business? Because if the basics aren't covered, how can they succeed in business?
I'll bring Dan back in on that, then we'll go to Dan Swain, if that's okay.
Yeah, so in terms of the data, that's not stuff the Chamber holds. I'll have to defer to the council colleagues to come in on the specifics of the question, David, unfortunately. In terms of people looking to get back into sort of employment, you know, I'm sure DWP have got a basket of stuff that they support people with, and in that nature. The very specifics of people getting into sort of self-employment, you know, the support available tends to be time, guidance, expertise, rather than sort of here's a pot of cash to tide you over in the first instance. But there are bits of that in the system. And again, I think the sort of organisations like Finance for Enterprise, who are sort of, again, business support partners along with ourselves, Business Doncaster, who can probably, with the right investment into them and the right sort of resource, do more in this kind of space to sort of make sure that cash assistance rather than the support assistance to micro enterprise is readily available. You know, and David, I absolutely acknowledge it's not a satisfactory answer to the enormity of the challenge that some of these people are facing. But that's the problem, where, you know, we can only play with the tools we've got, you know, and unless that sort of very specific resource is generated somewhere, sadly, it's not something that we can then grip hold of and deliver for people.
Dan, do you want to come in at this point?
Yes, if I could, thank you, Chair. It was just to pick up on the point of redundancies. I can't give you figures of redundancies, but what I can give you is some figures of claimants that may give you an indication as to whether or not there's been an increase in people out of work. And it's important to set some of this in context. But the reality is, for job seekers allowance in January of this year, that figure was at 1,163, which was actually up by 66 in a month, but also down by 53 from 6 months ago. But in comparison to 12 months ago, job seekers allowance was up by 577. So that gives you an indication that there are more people claiming that. In terms of universal credit, that was down at the end of January by 64 from the previous months, and actually 368 down in comparison to 6 months ago. The total change for those two elements of support had gone up by 6,785 in the last 12 months, and we've got data that we use because we are looking at a strategy, and it's labelled an anti-poverty strategy. But much of that, which the authority has, but it's from 2015, and it needs to be recast in the context of COVID impact and the roadmap out. But that data is very useful because what it provides you with an indication is the areas, and to a certain extent, what the sectors are that have been affected. Because as we know, some sectors have been more affected by this because of the, and quite rightly, to protect public health, but actually because of some of the restrictions in that they've not been able to operate. And then that has an effect on others because they're as part of the supply chain. So we do have data on claimants, but I don't have direct data on level of numbers of redundancy for you.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Nevitt, is there anything that you'd like to add or ask?
No, it's just, I mean, Daniel covered it with saying that they haven't got the resources to do that, but it's a case of with poverty, if there's no roadmap and no way of getting out of it, how are they ever going to succeed in business? If they can't succeed in their own personal finances, how can they move on into employment and business themselves? So, I mean, I just think that that's something that we need to look at in the future, Chair.
That's
Thank
very,
you.
very valid point, Councillor Nevitt. I don't know. I've just realised that. Have you had him before, or is it just now?
It's a new one.
Right. Do you want to come in, Councillor Cox?
Yep, thank you. Just off at back of furlough. Have you had any issues yet with the misuse of the furlough scheme? And excuse me, what plans does the Chamber have in repurposing the town centre and giving businesses some kind of incentive?
Well, the town centre isn't mine to play with, sadly, in that sort of sense. But I think so. So our role with the town centre is, we don't control any of the assets. We can't mandate that the businesses at the town centre do any.
Dan, we're losing you, I'm afraid.
Let me switch to a different Wi-Fi. Just spend me 30 seconds, Chair, and I'll see if I can swap onto a different Wi-Fi.
I think you were just a bit of a distance from your microphone, or maybe you had your hand over it, possibly. That's all it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought it meant my wife had started a meeting somewhere else in the house as well, and we were sort of fighting for bandwidth between us. So in terms of the town centre, Councillor, it's not ours in terms of an asset to control in that sense. Equally, we can't sort of say to any business in the town centre, thou shalt do a certain thing. So our role, along with other partners and colleagues, is, I suppose, as an influencer, a thought leader, all this kind of stuff. For me, the success of town centres across the UK is absolutely about mixed usage. I think the halcyon days and this Mary Porter's nonsense of revive the high street stuff, it is just that, it's nonsense. Our habits have changed incredibly. So the town centre needs to be a mix of retail, of hospitality, of leisure, of culture, education, residential, all these things. I don't think anybody would argue against that on this call. I think that the challenge is that the time it takes to sort of reimagine and get that cake mix right and delivered is a long haul thing. The free fall of some of our retail sector and our changing sort of shopping habits, etc., is much more rapid than that. So there's a lag between the problem and the solution for me. I think what we need to do, and this is back to some of the there's a bit of marketing and PR stuff around this. I think there's some kind of use it or lose it messaging out to our communities and people that could be helpful. I think there's a shortfall of commercial property space. I know Chris probably echoed that, which would be helpful if we could address that in some way to get more businesses into the town centre. And clearly, one of the big catalytic things that would help massively is the hospital. If we could get that in there and get the NHS thinking really laterally about what partnerships and collaboration, particularly with industry, might look like around that, that could be the sort of catalytic thing for the town as for big ticket region projects. But apart from concurring, it's a difficult problem to solve, Steve. I'm afraid I don't really have too much useful to say to that in terms of I haven't got a magic bullet that no one else has got, I'm afraid. So
Chair,
looking for it.
Chair, can I pick up on that point, because the town centre is my responsibility. We're in the process of putting together an economic recovery plan for the town centre, Councillor Cox, and one of the items in that recovery plan is repurposing of businesses, repurposing of buildings, and offering test trading for startups. So we're working both with MAM on the markets area and other private sector developers or shop owners on repurposing some buildings to put some startups in there. Possibly council putting some funding into taking short-term leases so to support new startups going into business and test trade. Continuing in that plan, there's a lot of work around marketing and promotion of the town centre. We can't at the moment, because at the moment we don't want people back until we can get them back after May. when hospitality opens again. But there's quite a lot of work in that plan around business support to businesses, around marketing of the town centre, around helping businesses trade differently, click and collect, etc., while ever they can't fully reopen their building to get the volume of people back in there. And we are looking at a town centre task force to work together on led by the private sector, to put proposals in place to help them recover and trade differently and trade successfully.
There has been, thank you, Chris. There has been something I've been keen to say for a long time, and I've said it quite a few times within this committee, is that, you know, there's a lot of companies, and it falls into a nice place now with trying to get people in new startups and encourage new businesses, is that we do have a lot of empty shop units, obviously, and some of the ones around Waterdale and looking at where the footfall would go to give them some of the startup initiative, and it were also something I suggested for in the market with the smaller stalls, to give little craftspeople or somebody a bit of something to bring people in. But yeah, I take your point, and thank you, Chris, for saying, you know, there's something there, because we do know a lot of people in the town centre that are in business and have found it really hard. It just on the furlough one, I'm assuming that you haven't had any response of anybody misusing it yet, which will obviously come back in their tax returns eventually, but you've not had anything.
We haven't, Steve, but that generally come through HMRC, not through ourselves.
Yeah.
So nothing's flagged up with us or regulations around that area.
Yeah.
Councillor Cox, if you'll allow me, do you know that question around the furlough scheme? Could we widen that a bit to ask about, do you know, as the chamber and as a local authority, have we been given enough support to businesses to be able to apply for furlough schemes and, you know, get access and understand the dynamics of how it works?
I can go ahead. Just if I can, Chair, just go back to the town centre one just for 1 second, because I think one intervention that would help, obviously in line with public health and safety and responsibility and all that kind of piece. By far and away, the biggest employer in our town centre is the local authority, you know, and I can say, as the local authority's nearest neighbour at Cast, of my chair of the theatre hat on, you know, how hard it is going to be to reopen our cafe bar is just one example of this in terms of footfall until the local authority is back and working safely in there. So I think there is a sort of a civic leadership role to play for the council in terms of getting people back in quickly when they can do, because that footfall will have a big positive impact on the economy. You know, obviously balanced with risk and all that kind of stuff, but that would be really helpful. In terms of sort of misuse of schemes and interventions, a few tiny bits have been on my radar here and there. You know, obviously it's irresponsible to name names in this kind of forum, but it's been a very small number and a minority. And, you know, where we have seen things like that, we've kind of, you know, just tried to work with partners to sort of get businesses just to sort of do what they should do. And 9 times out of 10, actually, it's been an education thing, not a ill will type thing, because people are just wrestling with new things and often doing things for the first time. You know, and we do all get things wrong every now and then, don't we? And that's the spirit of what we've seen. I think in terms of getting the information, the guidance out there, you know, that was our lives for sort of the 3 months to start the first lockdown. As I said, you know, up to 3 webinars a day, 2,000 delegates across those, you know, different businesses, and lots of explainers on how furlough worked, how CBILS worked, how to access stuff. You know, almost like trying to do the translation services piece between the sort of the national government speak and sort of the so what business kind of speak. You know, so I think we were really successful at that. And I think also, you know, our professional services sector, our accountants, our solicitors have done wonders actually a bit behind the scenes, helping firms with this. Can I just? I sort of feel that that's probably, you know, something that as a sort of support agency we did quite well actually.
Can I just say one more, please, Jeff?
Sure, Steve.
And it's to do with town and some of the grant funding that comes in, and bearing in mind that furlough will end at some point, and we know that it is going to make a difference. when it's gone. Do you think that some of the grant monies should be used to create employment instead of being used for different other projects, shall I say?
I think with that, if we bring in Scott Cardwell, I think Scott would be best placed to answer that one because he'll understand the dynamics of the funding and what it might be ring fenced for.
Yeah, I just in answer to your point, Steve, we'd love to do things like that, but the money comes ring fenced.
Yep.
And that's set out by central government. And clearly what they're trying to do is try and help businesses through and the staff employed through difficult times in COVID. And this still at the same time, and this predates COVID, is they were very focused on trying to reinvent the high street. So the other kind of key funding they're doing is capital schemes really for areas to try and reinvent the high street, try and move a little bit away from retail and try and bring more kind of leisure type uses in there, or stimulate office or residential development in town centres. We've not seen any funding streams specifically come from government around employment, but I know Sheffield City Region was lobbying governments around trying to secure funding to do just that. So there was almost like three elements to it. They were looking to secure a very large, multi-million pounds of funding, which would be around kind of major projects. It would also be around individual support for individuals, but also business stuff to give them more employability opportunities. So hopefully things, we might see the government respond to fund that. But at minute, as is the norm with most funding streams, you've got to deliver what the output is set by the people who are giving you the money.
But we do know that, Scott, within some of these schemes, they're supposed to give some kind of a financial benefit back to community. And it says that, doesn't it, within some of the bump that comes with them, instead of just plopping something that looks nice in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, at the heart of all the government funding streams, particularly to do with town centres, is regeneration. They just want to see them transformed into a sustainable environment, and unless these things connect with the communities around it, then they're not going to use them, are they? So yeah, that's probably where that influence comes in.
Yeah, thank you.
These funding schemes which were made available from central government, a portion of that which is allocated to directly increasing employment as a consequence of that project? Or I'm asking too vague and wider question there.
No, sorry, Chair, you just broke up at the beginning of it. So if you just wouldn't mind repeating it, that was all right. It's just had a bit of problem with connection.
What I was asking, following up from Councillor Cox's point, some of these, the grant schemes or the funding schemes or the funding which comes available from central government, do they apportion a part of that for job creation or redevelopment or specific aspects alongside the project, or is it wider than that?
Yeah, some of it can be, as again with most kind of funding schemes, and this is no different to funding that we've accessed through Sheffield City Region in the past. To do redevelopments, there is usually a bottom line, whether it's about calculations on GVA uplift or jobs secured or jobs produced. So pretty much all the funding streams do come with that. The smaller pots, which an example, there was a fund that we could access from central government called the Reopening High Street Fund. It was just £276,000. That wasn't really about job creation. That was about trying to change your urban environment to keep people safe while they were accessing your towns. But the larger capital schemes all tend to be based on, okay, you can get the money, but you need to demonstrate that you are going to be growing businesses and potentially creating new jobs.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll focus on them one at a time just so nothing gets lost. The first one is around the Freeport bid. I wonder if we could get an update on sort of the state of play on where the bid is, and also a sort of picture of what the benefits will be if we are successful with that.
Okay, can I take that, Chair? So
Of course,
the government did a call for Freeport applications in November. Sheffield City Region did respond by putting in a submission which had to be in by, I think it was the 5th of February. So they've done a pan Sheffield City Region bid, which there are some significant assets in Doncaster. So the government has asked for potential custom sites and potential tax sites. However, you're only allowed 3 tax sites within any Freeport area, and there's a restriction on how big your Freeport can be. I think it's 45 kilometres across. So in particular, for Doncaster, that includes assets such as Doncaster Sheffield Airport and also the inland port. They're the 2 kind of customs and tax sites within Doncaster. The third custom site, sorry, the 3rd tax site in the Sheffield City Region bid is Junction 36 at Barnsley, where there is an employment site there that's been included. Some of the custom sites have actually been made up of individual businesses. So some of the bigger steel manufacturing companies who do a lot of international trade, they put themselves forward for that. I suppose the key benefits is people will remember initiatives like enterprise zones, where they do give tax incentives to companies to actually relocate there. The Freeport is almost like an enterprise zone on steroids, so it does have those kind of tax benefits to companies locating there, but it also has freedoms and flexibilities about trade and how people can, just give you an example, you could have companies who could actually import goods, they don't pay any tax on it, and they could manufacture with that good, and then they only pay tax when they release the kind of product, which rather than paying twice for tax as well. There's obviously freedoms and flexibilities as well around the ports side of things as well, but obviously there will be rigid restrictions controlling how things do move through that. So it's not a kind of lawless state out there, because I know Freeports have had some kind of bad press around the perception that it's just a bit of a free-for-all and it can be open to exploitation. So the government's very keen on keeping that all aboard. The other thing is the government do expect that if you do get business rates above a certain level, that they must be reinvested into that Freeport area where they were generated from as well. So the government are wanting receipts to be used like that, blended with other funding streams and also private sector investment as well, to help infrastructure accelerate in those areas. And really the Freeports are really just around growing out that employment base a lot quicker than they originally would be. In terms of the bid, it's, as I say, it's gone in. We've just been told we should hear something in the spring, and then the next, if it is successful, and there is only 10 of these in the country, there'd then be an opportunity to submit an outline business case. So that's a much more detailed business case around the particular area. Okay.
Thank you. Dan, would you like to come in at this point?
Yeah, very, very brief, just to amplify everything that sort of Scott said, Chairman, and sort of 3 additional points. The first being sort of this bid is sort of really well supported by the private sector. We've seen a good response to that, and and there's some good cheerleading going on. I've got a letter to go to the Chancellor by the end of this week on behalf of the 3 chambers in South Yorkshire to kind of support partners in that lobbying effort and the rest of it. So this is well endorsed and supported. I mean, I'd love to see some of the kind of the innovation and sort of clustering benefits that would come of this as well, so particularly around sort of the airport estate. I think when we talk about the advanced manufacturing park over in sort of Waverley, we understand that as shorthand for a kind of collection of sort of world-class organisations and academia and the rest of it. When we talk about the airport, we just talk about the airport. And I'd like to actually talk around like a cluster of businesses that are collaborating and doing great stuff that can sort of drive innovation and investment partnership in our area. And then the other piece that I really think this could help with, and I referenced earlier, that sort of relative dearth of exporters that we have in Doncaster. We need to change that as part of our diversification and growth economy. I think the free cook really sort of catalyses becoming a bit of a centre of excellence in this stuff. We kind of locate our international trade business support in there, for argument's sake, and things of that nature. So I think we can use it to get more of our companies to look overseas.
Thanks for that. My second question was around the new business landscape. Obviously, we know businesses have struggled over the last year. Lots of them have failed, but usually when you have something like this, it creates opportunities for new ones to be formed as well. I was wondering if you have any numbers on how many new businesses there are in Doncaster, either from scratch or who've moved in, and in particular, how many of them are sort of focused on the online work from home model and what support's been available to them.
Just to answer, partly answer your point, we've seen a number of inward investors coming in over the last 3 months, and we've seen quite a lot of inquiries at the moment. In fact, we just landed 2 from online retailers who are looking for additional storage space. One's just gone in the iPort, one's gone in at Thorn. We've had a couple of smaller manufacturing companies coming in at Wheatley and at the airport site. We are a couple of Doncaster companies, particularly around manufacturing, Linden Systems, mobile installations, have took new sites, growing sites. So we have companies in Doncaster who are growing. We are seeing inquiries from the medical healthcare sector, which is interesting because we've never received them before. And we've got one particular company showing real interest in Doncaster at the moment, which will produce medical test kits. And if they do come, they'll create a significant amount of jobs. So the landscape is changing. We are seeing different sectors looking at Doncaster, including the environmental sector. And it's how we capitalise that and realise the assets we've got. One caveat of that is because as we start to become more sectoral, we're filling our buildings, so we don't have many buildings left of any magnitude to attract inward investment. So we're working out with the development community now to entice them to put up new buildings, put up new infrastructure in, which will help us attract a different kind of company. And things like the Freeport bid will help with that, because that will force the airport to put sites up at the airport.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I think that covers a lot of it, yeah.
Okay. Do we have any numbers on around home working, especially in new businesses which might have been set up during the pandemic, where people are primarily using the home as a base? And have they approached the Chamber for any kind of support on that, Dan?
Yeah, I'd have to sort of work with council to bring out the actual data, but I'm sure, you know, people at the NBC can sort of help that post this meeting. I suppose the anecdotal comments I would make would be, in terms of home working, based on the complexion of our economy, we've seen relative to other places less of that in the borough. So, you know, we've got that concentration in warehousing, distribution, logistics, etc. We talked about manufacturing base earlier, things you just simply can't do at home because that's not what our business stock looks like. But equally, where, you know, we've got B2B office-based organisations, we've seen, you know, little other than responsibility, and businesses sort of working pretty nimbly and safely to get people, you know, at home and all that kind of thing. So that's sort of going on the sort of home working piece. In terms of business startup, you know, as with all recessions, you know, we have seen and will continue to see an upward tick in people looking at self-employment as a route back into, you know, sort of gainful working. And I would certainly say that the project that ourselves and the NBC work on, Launchpad, aimed at sort of new traders, lifestyles, things of that nature, exceptionally busy, you know, way above the kind of contracted outputs for it, but that demand is there, and if people are looking for help, we will give it regardless of those what the contracts kind of say, you know what I mean.
I think we've had about 35 new startup inquiries since the start of the year on businesses looking to start businesses up. So we are seeing an increase in the levels of new startup through Launchpad.
Good, thank you, Chris. Councillor Beach, can I bring you in at this point if you've got any questions or comments?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, my question really is back to small businesses, about what support they are able to obtain, and also those that are unfortunately failing. And it doesn't really mean just the town centre, in the outer areas, you know, shopping areas. Those that are failing, are they ones that have sort of started up probably in the last 12 months, or are they the businesses that are probably 5 years down the line but still can't manage to succeed in these times? Have you got any figures on that sort of thing? Thank you.
We don't have any figures, Councillor Beach. We've not seen a significant amount of businesses failing out in the boroughs or any that's come forward to us. We are seeing some struggling who are starting to come to us now for support and help and support, and we work with the chambers across them. But we don't have any figures, I'm afraid, of businesses that have gone under in the last few months or so.
Yeah,
I can try and find them out if that's something you're interested in.
I'm interested in the outer areas, because I do know to two. I live in Aston, and I do know to two up in the village. Both happen to be cafes that will have said they will not open again because
What we do suggest, if you come across any businesses within your communities, please signpost them to Business Doncaster or Doncaster Chamber, and we will have staff who will go out there and do as much as we can to help them businesses.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for that. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Beach. I suppose the first part of the question in terms of the support available, as I mentioned earlier, and I won't go into detail on all of them because we'll be here for days, but our sort of core offer is 60+ services that are designed to help businesses grow, thrive, save costs. It goes anything from legals to sort of opportunities to be sure for events, back to the earlier buy local question, ways to support their staff through health interventions, etc. So there's a long menu of support available. Often the challenge is just making sure people know where to look for it, and we constantly got a battle of making sort of scarce marketing resource go far enough to bring people into us. But that help is available, and to reiterate the point, it's open to any business in Doncaster. In terms of business failures, we've seen a few of these. So when people lapse from the chamber, often one of the reasons is the company just doesn't exist anymore. So we have seen them. Clearly, a few more than we do ordinarily. I mean, even in normal times, businesses fail, so there's nothing exceptional about that. But we have seen a few more, obviously, as a result of COVID. I think in terms of where that's happening, it's less about the length of trading. Though clearly, the first couple of years, we know statistically there's more risk than there is further down the line people are established. It's more along sector lines, So the ones that are well rehearsed, well talked about in the press and media, leisure, hospitality, like you sort of mentioned, Councillor Beach, there's more cafes, little eateries, things of that nature. They're the ones who have just fundamentally been undermined by a lack of revenue coming in. And despite interventions to help them meet costs, they're just no longer viable businesses. So, we have seen failures, we will see more. And I think, again, the data says that we probably will see more businesses go under during the recovery than we do the slide into recession, because that's where sort of cash flow often gets the tightest for people.
Thank you.
But what we can do sometimes through the support is, and there's a sort of phrase is, you can save the business if not the company. So many of those that do go under, the entrepreneurs behind them will be able to sort of reboot and get going again, perhaps under a different guise.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that.
I'm just keen to inquire in relation to the mix of business that we have in Doncaster overall. Do we have a wide enough mix of businesses to ensure that once we are past the hiccups of Brexit, the economy of Doncaster to recover? What can we do to help diversify? Chris has touched upon that we are getting increased inquiries from different types of businesses that we don't traditionally have in Doncaster. But what else can we do to help that?
Do you want to go first, Chris, or me? Sorry.
Yeah, for me, and I'll always bang on it, and I have mentioned it earlier, we do need to look at increasing our business stock. We're very, very short of buildings fit for modern purpose now, certainly for manufacturing engineering, and we've got a lot of land. It's fair to say we've got a lot of land, but that land needs to be built upon. So we need to encourage developers to come in and build on the land, and that's around the airport, around the Unity project. Still some land available at the airport. but quite a lot of the accommodation in the town centres not fit for modern retail. It's not fit for purpose. So we need to do something around the town centre business stock as well. Very short on office space. We don't know how the office market's going to develop as people continue to work from home, but we do need some quality office space back. And that's my plea, that we do need increased business stock to put businesses into.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any other questions or any other points from any other members that they wish to raise at this point?
Sorry, Chair, just on the sort of the previous question, I suppose the short answer is yes, we absolutely must do more to continue diversifying our economy, you know. And I think what we are seeing is Doncaster really holding its nerve in terms of economic strategy and that diversification. You know, you go back 10, 12 years ago, you know, recovery from the banking crisis, you know, and Doncaster, you know, sensibly had the jobs a job strategy, and we sort of pursued the warehousing, logistics, distribution stuff, you know, perhaps above all other things, to kind of create the volume of jobs. And what I'm really pleased to see is that we're not pivoting back to that kind of strategy this time round, you know, and we are holding the nerve in kind of wanting to do more things. And I think the sort of the strength in depth and variety and that kind of thing, because if this last 12 months has taught us anything, is that we can get walloped from left field by an unprecedented thing, you know, and therefore having more legs to stand on is a good strategy. I endorse the things Chris said around the availability of property, development of infrastructure, etc., to support more immediate investment. One of the things we absolutely must keep getting right is skill supply into the area. You know, we've seen some positive change in terms of education improvement. You know, we're doing loads of work, set for opportunities, Doncaster, on work readiness, things like the University Technical College, good systemic interventions, but we need to do much more to sort of support the development of talent in our area, and I think particularly to work with our neighbouring universities so they add more value into Doncaster and don't get just in ring fence for Sheffield.
Thank you. There's a couple of points that I've picked up on, which I was hoping panel members might have raised in some of the questions, but I'll raise those now. Dan, you mentioned earlier, do you know, about chamber capacity, and when I was reading through the report, when we look at point, I think it's 39 of the report that you've compiled, which is very comprehensive, in relation to additional income which is required, and that you talk about that you've had to reduce and downsize number of staff and your team in the chamber, and at a time of when, you know, the residents and businesses of Doncaster need enhanced support and more guidance, maybe. Is that a wise thing to be reducing your team members at that point?
It's a good question, you know, and the reality is that the chamber doesn't just exist. The chamber's a business. We've had to manage through COVID as an enterprise the same way as the business community has, you know, and the chamber is a difficult business to run. You know, some of our core income has been decimated by this, you know, so we used to put on 200 physical events a year that generated quite a bit of income for the chamber to subsidise the other things that we do for free for the economy. You know, they have really disappeared. We talked about our manufacturing sector, which is our exporter base. You know, if they are manufacturing at 40% of capacity, that's 40% of the goods leaving Doncaster, therefore 40% of the international trade documentation revenue that we would typically get in a normal year. So our finances are being hit, not disastrously, but markedly in this, at a time where we've equally had our responsibilities of unprecedented demand for what we do in terms of support for the business community, but actually the call on our time from our partner community as well. So this is almost, for us as a business, a perfect storm in many ways with that. What we haven't been able to access, unlike other chambers in parts of the country or other membership organisations, has been investment into us from organisations like the City Region of Lep. So you look up the road to West and North Yorkshire. The local enterprise partnership has been subsidising memberships of the Chamber and the Federation of Small Businesses in that area to help those in the sector support. Nothing like that in South Yorkshire. Other membership organisations that are navigating through a crisis, Welcome to Yorkshire, had big bailouts to help them keep doing what they do. We've had nothing like that at all. We've existed on our wits and entrepreneurialism, and I have my responsibility to not just make sure we're doing stuff in the here and now, but to protect Doncaster's Chamber for the years ahead. So even with that cost reduction and with significant entrepreneurialism behind what we've done, our contribution towards reserves this financial year is tiny. We will trade at something like a 14k surplus this year. Tiny number, and I am not even clear yet, Majid, that that's the number we're going to land in 4 weeks to go. There's lots of moving parts to it. And as a business person, I hate that. And our surplus next year, we will just do something like 30k. And taking into that year considerable risk, including around our education division, and that which is so important, keeping young people plugged into employment. So the bit for me I'd want to land is our headcount is probably reduced. I don't think our capacity has, because we've worked really innovatively to sort of make sure we've got, we've thought laterally and we've protected the services and the expertise in the organisation. For council to be aware of, there is financial fragility in the Borough's Chamber. We want to keep doing more, and we will keep doing more, but it has to wash its face in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, we can't support a single business in this. I've got legal responsibilities. I can't trade the Chamber at a deficit forever because we don't exist, and I've got 16 non-execs who have the legal implications of that. And I can't do that as a
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah. If there were ways that but what we are doing, and this is just the final point on top chair, is based on my values and what we're there to do, the amount of sleep I lost to over that headcount stuff, I can tell you was a lot. What we are trying to do is move as quickly as we possibly can, and we've done this already, is the moment things start to look a bit better, the tap back on with resource again. As of this year already, we've made 4 new appointments into the team and brought some real expertise into the Chamber. So we are and we will grow that capacity back.
Certainly. Is that in addition to the 4 additional who are going to come from Sheffield City region? Is that in addition to that, or is that those? No,
that's in addition. They're posts the Chamber is sort of creating. Every month since June, we've actually had net growth in our membership, which is pretty unprecedented in membership organisations in this kind of climate. So as we grow our membership base commercially, I can reinvest that back into new account managers, business support experts that we just sort of pay for out of our membership fees. That's how we develop our headcount in the main. Separately from that, if new projects, new interventions come into the system that the Chamber can be a deliverer for, that helps us create capacity a bit quicker.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dan. Are there any other points that any other member wishes to raise, or any other contributions from any of our officers? Any points that you'd like to make? No? Well, in that case, Dan, thank you very much. Thanks for attending and thanks for presenting to us. Chris, a pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
You.
Scott, good to have you here. And Dan, thanks for being here. Dan Swain, you still here? You're not left? Okay, good. Yep, thanks for having you. A pleasure. And Councillor Nevitt, I can see you're indicating to speak.
Yes, Chair. I just want to thank you on behalf of the committee, but also the committee as well, for their work on this committee. I realise some people may not be returning after the election, so I just wanted to thank everybody on the committee, including the officers and those people who've joined us as well on this committee and the work it's done. So thank you, everybody.
Yep. Councillor Nevitt, you're quite right. The committee have been fantastic and have done a brilliant job in their roles, and I'd also like to wish everyone all the best for those who are not going to be returning after May. And that brings the meeting to an end, unless there was anything else, Christine, that you want to bring.
Yes, Chair. If you just want to wrap up this item, then you have the next item, which is the scrutiny work plan, before you actually close the meeting. I think we've lost you slightly.
And yeah, in that case, we'll move on to the next agenda item, and we'll ask Dan again. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending, but we'll have to leave you now, and Chris and other officers, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like me to just quickly do an overview, Councillor Khan?
Please.
Okay, just bear with me then. You'll see that the last item is actually the overview and scrutiny work plan, and that identifies the areas that you've obviously had to address this year. But what, as you've just alluded to, we're actually getting towards the end of year. This is the last meeting for the panel. But what I would like to ask councillors is if there are any areas that you wish that you would like to put forward for consideration next year, so that when we start addressing the new work plans during May, those can be looked at, see if you want to address them at that time. So that's just my question for members. If you do have any areas, then obviously please let me know. And also attached to the agenda is the council's forward plan of key decisions. Okay, thank you, Chair.
What I would say is, regardless of my position next year, whether or not I get re-elected or if I'm selected to be chair of this committee again, what I would urge the next committee who does take on, or the next chair who does take over from me, is that revisit what we've done today, maybe in November or December, post the reopening of the economy, post the restrictions of COVID, and see what impact the chamber, what our business support team are having. And November time, I think, would be good to come back and visit that, to really see if businesses are getting ready and geared up for the Christmas trading period, and if they've had adequate support over autumn as well. So Christine, can we include that as well, if that?
Yes, I've got that down there, Chair. I thought you may wish to readdress the issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Beach.
Thank you. I would like to have an appraisal of how all the alterations to the town centre, and whether it's progressing as they envisaged, in a sort of getting people from the railway station to the shopping areas and that, which of course will impinge quite a lot on their viability once we are out and about again. So I'd like an update on all that side of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Beach. Councillor, who have I got up? Vanished for a second.
Councillor Cox and Councillor Anderson.
Councillor Cox.
Duncan's hand were up before mine, I think.
Happy to go first if you like.
Yeah.
I thought it might be useful if we have either a briefing or some kind of session where we look at long-term plans and projects as sort of a big picture view. We look at them individually here and there, but I thought it might be useful to say this is everything that's on the table, this is how it all connects and weaves together, and this is the direction we're going.
Sure. What kind of time scale are you thinking of? 5 years, 10 years? What kind of?
I think at least 10 years.
10 years. Okay. So Christina,
again, it's sort of based on what projects are out there and in our future, which obviously officers will know better than I will.
Yeah. So I think what we need to look at in that is the way we envisage the town and the borough and the outlying towns are going to be shaped over the next 10 years, whether that's from an economy point of view, from a residential point of view, and an overall development, and see what we envisage. And if you're in agreement, Councillor Anderson, I think if we look at it from there, we'll have more benefit. Then we can see how it's all going to tie in together as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Cox.
Oh, yeah, I'm here, I think. Yeah. I'd like MAM to come back in, market traders to come back in, to see whether they're fitting, doing what they're supposed to and said they'd do, in way of paying some of the monies back, or how it's supporting traders.
And Councillor Cox, with that, do you want to have that with kind of like testimonials from some market traders as well, so we can see what the landscape on the ground is from market traders, how they feel about it as well?
It would be handy. I mean, obviously, because we did the calling thing, I've got letters in me thing here from traders. I've got, I think there's about 50 from traders.
Okay.
It might be nice to either reassure the ones that are still there that something's happening, or, you know, just to find out if what they're actually doing.
Okay. In relation to timescale of this, at the moment the market's not operating as it would be. Would you say we wait till after Christmas, once the Christmas trading period's done, or would you want to do that before then and do it maybe October, November time?
Yeah, I think more October, November, because we know that we are going to be opening back up.
Yep.
Well, once everything comes back and all vaccinations and all this malarkey's done, then yep. I think it'd be nice to see how it's changed the whole offer of the market and what they're going to do to improve on what's been done.
Fine. And what I'd propose with that as well, Councillor Cox, is if we do that in, say, November time, then we revisit again maybe the following year around April, May time, just to work out what's happened in between that. Give them a 6-month period in between then and work out what's happened and see how the Christmas period may have affected that.
Yeah, sorry, Mike, there was supposed to come back, weren't there, and give regular updates. Yeah. But I know we're in a funny space in time.
Yeah.
But
is everyone in agreement with my view on this, on doing it that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And something else that might be worth looking at is the developments that are going off around the airport and the way that the potential of affordable housing and things needs to be put in there where people are close to work. And I think that might be worth a look, because we see again and again that developers come back and say they can't afford it, and they're not the affordable units down. But with given the amount of development going off around there, and with Central Plaza development and all different ones, we need to know that people can actually afford to live where the job opportunities are. I think that would be another one worth looking at.
So, Councillor Cox, would you want that as something which is focused on housing and we bring in the housing around the airport, or something which is more around the airport development and we look at the element of housing? That makes sense.
Well,
sorry?
Everything.
So we're looking at housing across Doncaster and how housing around the airport is going to fit into that. Yeah.
Housing around Doncaster and how the affordability of housing is near workplaces. So it goes with a bit of a green agenda, that, doesn't it? Because you've got people commuting less to get to work. And instead of commuting from one side of Doncaster to another, they can afford to live near the workplace.
Sure. Christine, have you picked up on that?
Yes, Chair, I've got everything written down. With regards to time frames, I think you've obviously we're living in different times at the moment, and I'll obviously take advice from officers as to when would be appropriate for us to address certain issues. But obviously, I've taken down what you would like as a time frame, Councillor Carl.
Thank you. I mean, I'm keen on stuff, especially around the business support. That we do get that in before the end of the year, post autumn, but prior to winter, we get someone back in so we can really understand what's been going on, because we'll have a better indication then on business uptake, failure rates, support. There's going to be some additional schemes which are going to be announced today. I've been come to an end in or end of September, beginning of October. So I think it'll be timely to work out what's going on. Anything else, guys?
Thank you, Chair. That's great. I've kept a note. Thank you, Chair.
And I really mean this as a committee. You guys have been absolutely brilliant. You've always brought a lot to the table and added and made my job much more easier in doing so. So I'm grateful for all the support that you've given me, and especially Councillor Nevitt, in the support that he's given me in chairing when I've not been available. To Christine and Caroline as well, and now the support that we get from our officers. They have it's quite a heavy burden with all the committees that they have to manage and the workload that they have. And you know, I try my best not to overburden them. And if I have done anything to offend anyone, or if I have been, you know, come across as rude or anything, please, you know the nature of how I am. So please don't hold it against me.
Thanks, Chair.
I think that brings the meeting to an end, and I look forward to seeing many of you back on a committee order in, well, come May next year, hopefully.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. See you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.